Hidden within the thick morning mists of the Japanese highlands stands one of the most enduring symbols of the Eastern world. Built through centuries of isolation and fire, it draws millions of visitors from every corner of the globe each year. It was crafted by a civilization whose legacy stretched from the iron code of Bushido to our modern world. A bridge between ancient spirits and future technology. Its quiet strength still echoes in the heart of the archipelago. But ancient Japan was more than cherry blossoms and quiet meditation. It was a place of savage, relentless rivalries. A world of radical choices where honor, power, and absolute betrayal collided in a struggle that would last for generations. As the world moved forward, the silence of the Japanese archipelago was finally broken. The age of the hunter was dying, and the age of the warrior was about to begin. New settlers from the mainland brought more than just grain. They brought the secrets of bronze and iron. Weapons that were no longer made of stone, but forged for a new kind of power. Agriculture turned the wilderness into a prize, and territory became something worth dying for. By the 4th century, the first great clans emerged, building massive tombs that still mark the Japanese landscape today. But the peace of the imperial court was a fragile mask. Beneath the surface of poetry and silk, a fire was beginning to burn. A heat of ambition that would soon turn the entire empire into a furnace. Ambition didn't start with armies. It started in the hearts of men who felt the old system was failing them. In dark forges across the provinces, iron was being hammered into a new destiny. The age of the sword was arriving. The old laws written by poets were becoming worthless. Power was no longer found in ink, but in steel. The first shoguns didn't just take power, they redefined what it meant to rule. By 1185, the transformation was complete. The emperor remained a god in his palace, but the shogun became the master of the world. The shoguns had brought order, but order has a tendency to turn into arrogance. For nearly 2 centuries, the Ashikaga dynasty ruled from their golden palaces, growing distant from the very warriors who put them there. Kyoto became a dream of gold and zen. The shoguns spent fortunes on architecture and art, while the provinces began to starve. Inside the court, power was no longer won on the battlefield. It was traded in whispers and secret alliances behind silk screens. Outside the capital, the land was forgotten. Taxes were raised, but the protection of the shogun was nowhere to be found. By 1460, the tension reached a breaking point. 2 powerful families stood ready to tear the country apart over a single question. Who would be the next shogun? They gathered their armies in the shadows of the capital. 80,000 men on one side, 100,000 on the other. Kyoto was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Kyoto was no longer a city of peace. It was a powder keg, where 200,000 warriors waited in the shadows for a single spark to ignite the nation. In 1467, the spark was struck. The Onin War began not on a battlefield, but in the heart of the capital. Within days, the jewel of Japan was a furnace. Ancient temples and golden pavilions that stood for centuries were reduced to ash in a matter of hours. This was not a noble war. It was a brutal, street-by-street slaughter. Neighbor fought neighbor, and the streets ran red with the blood of the innocent. The war lasted for 11 years. When the fires finally died out, Kyoto was a graveyard. But the real nightmare was only beginning. The war lasted for 11 years. When the fires finally died out, Kyoto was a graveyard. But the real nightmare was only beginning. This was the dawn of the Sengoku Jidai, the age of the warring states. A century of darkness, where every lord became a king, and every valley a battlefield. With the capital in ruins, the story of Japan moved to the mountains and the valleys. The old world of bloodlines was over. A new era had begun, where a man's worth was measured not by his ancestors, but by the sharpness of his steel. This was the rise of the Sengoku daimyo. Unlike the lords of the past, these were warlords of a new breed. They didn't wait for permission from Kyoto to rule. They built their own worlds, high above the clouds. Across the archipelago, thousands of fortresses began to appear. These were not palaces of beauty, but machines of war, yamajiro, or mountain castles, designed to be impregnable and eternal. But a castle is only as strong as the men who defend it. For the first time in history, the war was no longer just for the elite samurai. It belonged to the masses, to the Ashigaru, the light-footed foot soldiers. Farmers became warriors, warriors became lords. In this chaos, the social order was turned upside down. They called it Gekkokujo, the low subduing the high. A beautiful, terrifying transformation. The center of this era was the sword. To a samurai, the katana was not just a tool for killing, but a spiritual extension of his own soul, a symbol of authority in a world without laws. Forging such a blade was a sacred act. Master smiths would spend weeks folding iron thousands of times, praying for the steel to remain pure and the edge to never break in the heat of battle. Protection was a complex puzzle of silk and iron. A high-ranking daimyo's armor was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to deflect arrows while allowing the wearer to move with lethal grace on the field. Before the sword, there was the bow. Master archers were the most feared units of the early Sengoku period, capable of picking off generals from hundreds of yards away through the thickest fog. But not every battle was won with honor. This was also the age of the shinobi, shadows who lived in the cracks of history, specialists in espionage, arson, and the quiet art of assassination. They were the invisible hand of the daimyo. A single shinobi could end a war before it even began, slipping through the tightest defenses to deliver a poison or a message that changed everything. Defense became a religion. Castle walls were built with massive, interlocking stones that used no mortar. designed to sway with earthquakes and withstand the brutal impact of the first primitive cannons. Wars were won in the mind before they were fought on the ground. Generals spent days over maps made of rice paper, calculating the movement of thousands of men across a landscape of mountains. Communication was life. From peak to peak, signal fires carried news of an invasion across entire provinces in minutes, a network of light that kept the daimyo's domains alert and ready. An army, however, marches on its stomach. Thousands of laborers followed the warriors, carrying rice, salt, and the supplies needed to sustain a siege that could last for months under the winter snow. In the small province of Owari, a young man was seen as a failure. He dressed like a peasant, ignored court etiquette, and acted like a madman. They called him the Fool of Owari. Little did they know, this fool was observing a world that was about to burn. At his father's funeral, while others wept in silk robes, Nobunaga threw incense at the altar and walked away. He rejected the old ways, the fake rituals, and the weak leaders. He didn't want to follow the past. He wanted to destroy it, to build the future. Owari was small, but it was rich in rice and trade. Nobunaga understood that gold was as powerful as steel. He turned his domain into a military machine, recruiting anyone who could fight, regardless of their social rank. In 1560, the storm arrived. A massive army of 25,000 men marched toward Owari. Nobunaga had only 2,000. It was a death sentence. Most generals advised surrender. Nobunaga only smiled and waited for the rain. The rain fell like needles, blinding the enemy. Under the cover of the thunder, Nobunaga's small force struck like a lightning bolt. In minutes, the enemy commander was dead, and the world realized that a new power had risen in the east. But Nobunaga's true genius wasn't just in his courage. It was in his curiosity. He was the first to see the potential of a new weapon brought by southern barbarians, the matchlock musket. While others saw it as dishonorable, he saw it as the future. He didn't just buy guns, he changed the way men fought. He trained peasants to fire in volleys, creating a wall of lead that could stop the most legendary samurai cavalry in its tracks. Honor was dying. Efficiency was being born. He adopted a new seal, Tenka Fubu. It meant the realm under military rule. It was a declaration of war against the entire archipelago. He wouldn't rest until every province, every clan, and every monk bowed to his iron will. From his new base at Gifu Castle, Nobunaga looked out over the ruins of a divided Japan. He was no longer a fool. He was the demon king of the sixth heaven, and the path to Kyoto was finally open. But as his power grew, so did the number of his enemies. To unite Japan, Nobunaga would have to do more than just win battles. He would have to challenge the gods themselves. Nobunaga didn't just fight warlords, he fought gods. In 1571,
he burned the holy Mount Hii to the ground, executing thousands of warrior monks. He proved that no one, not even the heavens, could stand in his way. But the greatest danger wasn't on a mountain. It was in the shadows of his own inner circle. General Akechi Mitsuhide, a man of tradition and honor, began to fear the monster his master had become. In 1582, at the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto, the end came swiftly. Mitsuhide's troops surrounded the temple at dawn. Nobunaga, with only a few guards, realized there was no escape. The Demon King was trapped. Nobunaga didn't beg for mercy. Legend says he performed his final seppuku inside the burning hall, disappearing into the flames as the temple collapsed. The man who nearly united Japan was gone. From the ashes rose an unlikely successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He started as a lowly sandal-bearer, a peasant whom Nobunaga called the monkey. But beneath that face was the most brilliant mind in Japan. Hearing of his master's death, Hideyoshi performed a miracle. He marched his entire army over 200 kilometers in just a few days, catching the traitor Mitsuhide completely off guard. In the Battle of Yamazaki, the monkey crushed the traitor. Mitsuhide, who ruled for only 13 days, died in the mud. Hideyoshi was no longer a peasant. He was the new master of destiny. To show his power, Hideyoshi built a castle that the world had never seen, Osaka Castle. A mountain of stone and gold, a fortress so massive it could be seen from miles away, a symbol of the new unified Japan. Hideyoshi knew that a peasant could rise to power because he had done it. To prevent anyone from following his path, he ordered the sword hunt, confiscating all weapons from the farmers. The age of the peasant warrior was over. By 1590, the dream of Nobunaga was finally a reality. For the first time in over a century, Japan was one. But Hideyoshi's ambition didn't stop at the ocean. He began to look toward the horizon, toward Korea and China. Hideyoshi became obsessed with his legacy. He built a tea room made entirely of solid gold, trying to prove that a peasant could be more refined than any emperor. But in his search for immortality, he began to lose touch with the very generals who won him his throne. His ambition crossed the sea to Korea, but it turned into a nightmare. Thousands of samurai died in a frozen land for a dream that wouldn't come true. The unity of Japan began to crack under the weight of a war that no one wanted but him. While others fought and bled, one man waited in the shadows, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Nobunaga was the fire, Hideyoshi was the gold, but Ieyasu was the stone. He knew that the one who can wait the longest is the one who eventually wins everything. Late in life, Hideyoshi finally had a son, Hideyori. But the boy was a child in a world of wolves. On his deathbed, Hideyoshi begged his 5 most powerful lords, including Ieyasu, to protect his son. He made them sign their oaths in blood. In 1598, the monkey died. His last words were a poem about life being a dream within a dream. As his body grew cold, the fragile peace of Japan shattered. The oaths signed in blood were worth nothing more than the paper they were written on. The country split in two. In the west, Ishida Mitsunari, a loyalist to the Hideyori name, gathered a massive coalition. He was a man of bureaucracy and rules, determined to stop Ieyasu from seizing the ultimate prize. Families were torn apart. Brothers chose opposite sides. Every daimyo in Japan had to make a choice. loyalty to a dead man's son, or survival under the rising sun of the Tokugawa. The two largest armies in history marched toward a small, foggy valley called Sekigahara. Over 160,000 men gathered in the mud. This wasn't just a battle, it was the final judgment of the Sengoku Jidai. October 21st, 1600. The sun rose over a valley covered in a fog so thick that soldiers couldn't see their own hands. They waited in silence, listening to the sound of thousands of hearts beating as one, waiting for the first shot. The fate of Japan was about to be decided in a single afternoon. Ieyasu sat on his stool, calm and ready. He had waited his whole life for this moment, and now the fog was beginning to lift. The silence didn't break, it shattered. At 8 in the morning, the first musket fire echoed through the valley. In an instant, 80,000 men on each side surged forward, and the ground of Sekigahara turned into a river of mud and steel. This was the greatest clash in samurai history. Horses screamed, blades met bone, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood. For hours the lines held. It was a stalemate of pure, relentless violence. High above the valley on Mount Matsuo sat the key to the battle, Kobayakawa Hideaki. He had 15,000 men, but he didn't move. He was the kingmaker watching the slaughter below, torn between his oath to the west and his fear of the east. Tokugawa Ieyasu was losing his patience. He ordered his cannons to fire, not at the enemy, but at the hill where his ally Kobayakawa sat. It was a message. Decide now, or die where you stand. It was the ultimate gamble of a master strategist. The gamble worked. Kobayakawa's army charged, not down at Ieyasu, but into the flank of his own Western allies. The betrayal was like a knife in the heart. In that moment, the Western army realized the war was lost. The Western line disintegrated. Generals who had been loyal to the Hideyori name for decades found themselves surrounded and slaughtered in the mud. The fog finally lifted, revealing a valley of corpses and broken dreams. Among the ruins stood the legendary Otani Yoshitsugu. Sick and blind, he fought to the end, ordering his servant to cut off his head so the enemy wouldn't find it. He died with honor in a world that had just been sold for power. By 2 in the afternoon, the fighting was over. Tokugawa Ieyasu sat on his stool once more, this time as the undisputed master of Japan. He calmly inspected the heads of his enemies as the rain washed the blood from his armor. The Sengoku Jidai, the century of fire, was finally dead. The age of the warring states had been extinguished in the mud of Sekigahara. A new world was being born, one where order would be maintained with an iron fist for the next 200 years. Ieyasu didn't return to Kyoto. He looked east toward a small fishing village called Edo. It was there that he would build his capital, and it was there that the most stable empire in human history would truly begin. The smoke of Sekigahara cleared, and for the first time in a century, Japan breathed. Tokugawa Ieyasu, became shogun, establishing a dynasty that would lock the world away and freeze time itself. This was the Pax Tokugawa, the Great Peace. Ieyasu didn't choose the ancient streets of Kyoto for his capital. He turned his eyes east to a small fishing village called Edo. Thousands of workers moved mountains of earth to build a city that would one day become Tokyo, the largest metropolis on the planet. In this new world, the sword stayed in its scabbard. The warriors who once lived for battle were forced to find a new purpose. The art of war was slowly replaced by the art of law, poetry, and administration. The samurai changed. They became scholars and bureaucrats, navigating a complex web of rules and etiquette. To be a warrior now meant to serve the state with a brush as much as with a blade. It was a golden age, but for many, it felt like a golden cage. To keep this peace, the shoguns made a radical choice. They closed the gates. Under the policy of Sengoku, Japan turned inward. Foreigners were expelled and the ocean became a wall. For 200 years, Japan evolved in total isolation, a secret kingdom hidden in the fog. While the elite studied, the streets of Edo exploded with life. This was the floating world, a culture of kabuki theater, woodblock prints, and geisha districts. It was a society of hidden pleasures and artistic brilliance, safe and stable under the iron eye of the shogun. But peace cannot last forever. In 1853, the horizon changed. Giant steamships breathing black smoke appeared in the bay. The world had come knocking, and the iron gates of the Tokugawa were about to be forced open. The age of the samurai was facing its final sunset. The isolation was broken not by a sword, but by steam and coal. In 1853, the American black ships forced Japan to look at a world that had moved on without it. The shogunate, once invincible, was now a relic of a dying age. To the samurai on the shore, these metal giants were demons of smoke. They realized their katanas could do nothing against long-range cannons. Japan had a choice: modernize or be conquered. It was the beginning of the Boshin War, a civil war for the very soul of the nation. The battlefield changed overnight. Traditional armor was replaced by Western uniforms. The bow was replaced by the Gatling gun. Samurai had to choose sides, fight for the emperor and the future, or die for the shogun and the past. In just a few decades, Japan performed a miracle. It transformed from a feudal kingdom into a global industrial power. But in this new world, there was no place left for the warrior class. Cinematic medium shot. A sad, elderly samurai handing over his katana to a young policeman in a modern uniform. Rainy city street at dusk. Gas lamps. Emotional atmosphere. Historical realism. One last time, the old world rose up. Saigo Takamori, the last samurai, led a final rebellion in 1877. Thousands of warriors charged into a war of modern bullets, choosing a glorious death over a world they no longer recognized. The samurai died, but their spirit did not. It moved from the battlefield into the boardrooms, the schools, and the very heart of Japanese identity. The code of Bushido became the foundation of a new kind of empire. Today, the castles stand as silent witnesses to a century of fire. The era of the warring states is a distant echo, but its lessons on honor, resilience, and the cost of power remain as sharp as a master-forged blade. History is not just a list of dates. It is a bridge between who we were and who we are. Japan's journey through the Sengoku Jidai proves that even from the deepest ashes, a nation can rise to touch the stars. We walked through the ashes of Kyoto and the fog of Sekigahara. Looking at modern Japan, this forest of skyscrapers and neon, it's hard to believe that all this grew up on the ruins of the 100 Years' War. But for me, this story is not about dates. It's about the incredible ability of man to be reborn when everything seems lost. The first lesson I take away from this journey is resilience. The samurai taught us that beauty and death are always close together. Like a cherry blossom petal, life is short, but it must be lived with dignity. Even in the darkest times of the Sengoku, the Japanese did not just survive, they created masterpieces of architecture, philosophy, and art. We have seen Nobunaga's fire, Hideyoshi's gold, and Tokugawa's stone. Each had their own path to peace. It makes us wonder, what price are we willing to pay for our ambition? The samurai remind us that true power is not control over others, but control over ourselves. Today, swords are a thing of the past, but the Bushido code has not disappeared. You feel it in Japanese politeness, in dedication to their cause, in the quiet strength of this people. I am sure in each of us lives our own inner samurai, who daily fights his own battle for honor and truth. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Exploring these 35 minutes of history was a reminder to me that even after the longest night, there is always a dawn. Find your path, protect your honor, and don't be afraid of change, because it is from them that the future is born. Japan's history is not just the past. It is a bridge, and as long as we remember these lessons, the warrior's heart continues to beat. Thanks for watching. See you in the next eras. Thanks for watching.